morning. I trust all is going well, and it's been a while since we've had a Friday morning chat. I know you're extremely busy, as I have been. I wanted to take a moment this morning and show you a video that I am taking out into our community. Want you to be aware of what is being said out in the community about one of the major issues we're facing in American education, and not one that's often talked about. My lead into this video is going to be rather short, and then I'm going to come back on at the end and just do a quick debrief and let you go on your way. Jamie Vollmer, who is speaking in this video, is a businessman in the Midwest. He became very concerned about American public education and the, quote, failure of America's schools. He is CEO of a very large ice cream company in the Midwest, voted the best ice cream in the Midwest in one of their annual polls. But as a very open critic of public education, he took it a step further than most people. And he decided to immerse himself in public education to try to understand what might be at the heart of some of our issues. And what he uncovered, he presents to you in this following video. So please watch.
Driver's education.
Business education.
Organized athletics.
Domestic science.
Immunizations.
Industrial
Vision
arts.
screenings.
Art and music.
This is the story about
School lunch
America
programs.
and America's public schools.
Computer
Specifically,
science.
it's about how we, as a
CPR.
society, have changed what we ask our public
Global
schools to do.
education.
Once upon a time, the mandate was simple. Help us teach our children what they need to
Theater.
know. Not anymore.
Business education. Organized athletics. Domestic.
My name is Jamie Vollmer. I speak and write about public education, and I contend that this story is important. Our response will determine everyone's future, whether or not we have children in school. For the first time in our history, social and economic conditions demand that we unfold the full potential of every child. This goal has never been achieved anywhere in the world, and the only way that we can succeed is by working together to remove the obstacles of student success, both in and out of school. But instead of accepting a shared community-wide responsibility for student success, we act as though our teachers and administrators can and should do it alone. Every year we add to the mountain of academic, social, psychological, and medical responsibilities that we've heaped upon our schools. Every year the burden grows. This is a story of the creation of this burden, and it starts a long time ago. America's first public schools were established in the mid-1700s. Most were small, rural, and locally controlled. They were designed to teach young people, originally white boys, basic reading, writing, and arithmetic, while transmitting American culture. Over time, lessons in civics, history, geography, and science were added, but the curriculum was limited for 150 years. By the beginning of the 20th century, however, waves of immigration and changed attitudes about educating both girls and minorities brought many more children into the classroom. America's leaders saw public schools as a logical place to select and sort young people for life in the industrial age. It was at this time that we began to shift non-academic duties to the schools. The trend has accelerated ever since. From 1900 to 1910, the new responsibilities were mainly related to student health. We added lessons in basic hygiene, nutrition. Schools began to give immunizations, and we screened for vision, hearing, and dental problems. From 1910 to 1940, child labor laws swept the nation. The multiple choice test was created, and we saw the first wave of standardized tests. We also began tracking students, And to this end, we added vocational education, including the industrial arts, and agricultural education, domestic science, including sewing and cooking. Phys ed was expanded, including a growing roster of team sports, and school transportation was mandated. For decades, kids had to get to school on their own. Now we had to go fetch them. In the 1940s, a decade overshadowed by a horrific war and a remarkable recovery, we added business education. Music and art classes were expanded. Speech, including drama, became a separate academic subject. Half-day kindergartens were first introduced, and school lunch programs appeared. We take this for granted today, but it was a huge step to shift to the schools the responsibility of feeding America's children 1/3 of their daily meals. In the 1950s, the student population exploded as the first baby boomers poured into the schools. The Supreme Court struck down school segregation. The Soviets launched Sputnik. Panic ensued. And in response, science and math education were greatly expanded. Foreign language requirements were strengthened. Fire and tornado drills became compulsory. Driver's education was offered to the delight of parents everywhere. And sex education was introduced. Sometimes I wonder how we made it as a species prior to the 50s. In the 1960s, the pace of change accelerated. We saw new waves of standardized testing, and Congress made its first regulatory push into public education by passing Title I of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which introduced Head Start and bilingual education. The College Board offered advanced placement programs. We added adult education, courses in career education, and programs in recreation education, and of course, peace studies. God bless those 60s. In the 1970s, the breakup of the American family accelerated. Vietnam came to a close, Watergate changed American politics forever, and we added drug and alcohol abuse education, parenting education. African American studies introduced students to the contributions of black leaders, including Frederick Douglass, Dr. King, and Harriet Tubman. Women's studies spread from college to high school curriculums. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of free speech rights for students. And Title IX expanded athletic programs for girls, nearly doubling the cost of sports. Special education was mandated by the feds. We added talented and gifted programs, alternative education, and character education. Environmental education was first taught, and school breakfast programs appeared. Now schools must feed their students 2/3 of their daily meals, and for many, it's the only nutritious food they get. In the 1980s, the floodgates blew open as global competition began to change the U.S. economy, forcing millions of women to enter the workforce. There's a huge new wave of standardized testing. New technologies began to appear in the schools. And we added keyboarding and computer education, sexual abuse prevention education, stranger danger education, anti-smoking education, teen pregnancy awareness, abstinence education, global education, multicultural non-sexist education, Hispanic heritage education. We added preschool programs for children at risk, full-day kindergartens, after-school programs for children of working parents, Jump Start, Early Start, Even Start, Prime Start, and child abuse monitoring became a legal requirement for all teachers. In the 1990s, the school reform movement shifted into high gear, and it collided with the spread of technology. Whiteboards began to replace chalkboards. The World Wide Web was born. Generation X was replaced by Generation Y, and we added computer labs and internet education, tech prep and school-to-work programs, distance learning, homeless education and its effects on children, HIV/AIDS education, death education. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act was passed, which greatly expanded the scope of special education for children with disabilities. America 2000 initiatives produced a wave of red tape and testing. 4 years later, Goals 2000 initiatives unleashed more red tape and testing. We saw new programs in bicycle safety, gun safety, water safety. We added conflict resolution, annual sessions of CPR training. We strengthened dropout prevention, instituted gang intervention programs, and as a result of isolated but horrific acts of violence, we saw an unprecedented effort to ensure school security. And finally, in the first decade of the 21st century, driven by the pressures of a rapidly changing society, particularly those posed by an increasingly literate global workforce. We have added No Child Left Behind, bullying prevention, elevator and escalator safety instruction, obesity monitoring for all students, counseling for kids with eating disorders, courses on organ donor awareness, steroid abuse, media literacy, personal finance, internet safety, health and wellness, race to the top, and STEM programs. And we've not added a single minute to the school calendar in 6 decades. Look at this list. Look at what we've done. For all the talk we hear about test scores, accountability, merit pay, competition, and choice, for all the criticism leveled at our public schools, no one acknowledges that the contract between our society and our schools has changed. It's no longer help us teach our children, it's raise our kids. No generation of teachers and administrators in the history of the world has had to fulfill this mandate. And each year, the burden grows. We bombard our schools with new responsibilities. We insist that they compensate for society's failures and neglect. All the while, we demand that they meet rising academic expectations. The truth is, social and economic conditions demand that we unfold the full potential of every child. Our futures are tied to their success as never before, whether or not we have children in school. But this is a job for all of us. We must all come together and help our schools remove the obstacles to student success. Because if there's only one thing I've learned in 20 years of working towards this goal, it's this: our schools cannot do it alone. They need our help. They need our understanding and support to produce the graduates and the citizens we need.
Well, welcome back. Now, if you're like me, by the time we got to the end of the video, the first time I watched it, I was exhausted. And it really overwhelmed. I had no idea all that has been added to American public education. And many of you remember the metaphor of the frog. You know, if you take a live frog and you drop him in a hot frying pan, he's going to jump out. If you take a live frog and set him in a frying pan and slowly turn up the heat, he will die. What has happened to us over 110 years, I think, has eluded most public attention. And you saw the list. I have one here of all of those things that have been added to the public education curriculum, our responsibilities. And as Jamie pointed out at the end of his video, all of this has been added without a single day or minute being added to the time that we've had the kids in school, at least not over the last 60 years. I believe this is an important message to get not only to our community, but to our politicians as well, that if they want to fix American public education, part of what needs to be done is to look very carefully at the things on this list that really are either no longer essential, or the things on this list that are better performed by another agency within the community. So I just wanted you to see that. Additionally, I want you to know that I've become very active in the political arena in the last few weeks in engaging our legislators, and you may have read also the governor, and have an opportunity to share with them my concern, shared with the other 66 superintendents in the state of Florida, my concern about the rate and the rollout of all of the reforms that we're facing. And I'll just conclude with a very simple statement or two to you. The essence of the message is you're demanding too much, too fast. This can't be done. We are facing a train wreck in 2014-15. We cannot acquire the depth of knowledge we need on core curriculum, on the new teacher and administrator performance appraisal systems, the new park assessment systems, the rollout of the use of technology for testing and for textbooks, and implement performance pay in any reasonable way within this next 2-year window. And what we are requesting our policymakers to do is, while we continue to engage in the conversation about performance pay and what that may end up looking like, that be pushed back at least to the 16-17 school year, while we as educators try to digest at least the Common Core, the new appraisal systems, and the park assessment system that's coming our way. We've reiterated that we have very little money to put into professional development, that this is going to take time. So I want you to know that I'm doing what I can to influence the influencers that are out there to rethink not only what they're doing, but the time frame in which they're doing it. That said, I want you to have a great weekend. I'm not going to let another 4 or 5 weeks go by before I get back with you with another video, so hopefully I'll see you again in about 2 or 3 weeks. Thanks, and have a great weekend.